On Thanksgiving Day in the year 2020, I went to visit the mysterious Georgia Guidestones. But they really aren't the mystery that you think they are. Let's get into it. Hello, good people. Before we get started, I'll let you know I'm not a pro-Christian or anti-Christian or pro-Guidestones or anti-Guidestones. I just found that when I went to the site that the real mystery lied in the messages and not in how they got there or who put them there. So I decided to share what I think with you. You can find a wealth of info about these stones online or at the actual site itself on the placards that were put there. So this video isn't necessarily about how these things came to be, but rather my interpretation of the messages on the stones and why they're so mysteriously general and not in line with most Christian values when they are purported to be commissioned by a Christian group. So here's the quick and dirty rundown. So around 1979, a stranger operating under the pseudonym Mr. Christian, no, not the breakout single Sister Christian by Night Ranger, but Mr. Christian, which the info on the placard at the site of the monument says was assumed by him because he was, well, Christian. More on that later. Well, Mr. Christian approached the president of a granite finishing company there in Elberton, Georgia. He said he represented a group, the Guidestone Group, that wished to remain anonymous forever, but wanted to erect these megaliths in Elberton, where the granite is so fine. These megaliths would have texts engraved on them in many languages, and these messages would serve as a cautionary guidance to humankind. 10 messages for what would seem to be the guidelines of rebuilding society or just humanity in general after a collapse or a great disaster or the like, which is eerie given today's circumstances. You know, with COVID and all, and when this thing was commissioned, the Cold War was in full swing. You can see how some folks might have thought world annihilation was possible at that time or feared such a thing. But if these messages are coming from a Christian source, they sure don't have much in the way of Christian undertones. So with that in mind, let's get to message number 1. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Well, I think Genesee Book 1, Voice 28 would disagree with that, Mr. Stone. You see, God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and every creature that crawls upon the earth." Now, obviously, rule over and balance don't mean the same thing, and be fruitful and multiply isn't followed by until you hit that sweet spot at 500 million. But whoever wrote this message had a basic understanding that if any creature, human or not, were too populous on the earth, the balance would be lost. Now, putting a specific cap on the number of humans is a little unscientific for sure, but the general idea seems legit. I get it, but it's not very Christian, Mr. Christian. Message number 2. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. So this one starts out as a Proud Boy's wet dream, it seems like, promoting some sort of like ethnic purity or something, and then boom, big U-turn, saying to improve fitness and diversity. So to me, this sounds like the message is to improve the human form by reproducing the best qualities in the human, which helps it survive and thrive in the terms of like health and hardiness and aptitude and fortitude. And this could be defined as eugenics, sure. Or is it telling us to only reproduce if there will be a net gain in terms of constructing a more evolved human form? Not very Christian sounding to me, because to attain such a thing would require things like, I don't know, fucking abortion, extramarital sex, and gasp, children out of wedlock? I don't know. Anyway, message number 3. Unite humanity with a living new language. So this may be some sort of metaphor for something, but if you take it in the literal sense, I assume it would mean a unification of the surviving peoples under one universal language so that everyone can communicate with everyone. The language would probably develop its own regions and dialects as time goes on, but it would still be started as a singular unifying thing. I don't quite understand this one, but if you looked at it a certain way, it could be viewed as a Christian tenet because it's setting a single language as the thing to adhere to, the place to start from. Just like the notion of monotheism or a single God to worship, this would be a single language to start from. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Message number 4.
Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason.
I'll refer you to the Old Testament. See if you can find any tempered reason there. Message number 5.
Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts.
So here we have the notion that there will be multiple nations, which is confusing to me because in the post-apocalyptic world where we're supposed to have one unified language and where we're supposed to keep the population down, why would there be a need to form many nations? It would seem like that if this one language society were to break down in some way, or if groups wanted to form their own nations, they would do so to escape the mono-language system, right? Which leads to the next confusing message. Message number 6.
Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court.
So now we have a court for the nations, okay? Plus all of a sudden, now there's a world court, which rules over the disputes of all these many nations now? Okay, well, what do you call that court? Something like, I don't know, the fucking New World Order? I don't think many people would go for that, especially Christians. That's just a thought. But then it gets ever so much more confusing with the next message. Message number 7.
Avoid petty laws and useless officials.
Well, every law is petty to someone, and some laws are petty to everyone. And I could opine that a lot of God's laws are, well, petty. Again, I'll refer you to the Old Testament. And aren't all officials essentially useless? And who decides which officials are useless or not? God? Or the guy or gal writing on these stones? If there were only some sort of leader to define this idea, whatever. Message number 8.
Balance personal rights with social duties.
This is strikingly similar to the tenets of the Native Americans that once lived here, and we all know how the Christians felt about them. So, message number 9.
Prize truth, beauty, and love, seeking harmony with the infinite.
Who decides the truth? Whose eye doth behold this beauty? And what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me. No more. Message number 10.
Be not a cancer to the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature.
Well, they had to say that last part twice. But do we rule over nature like the Bible says? Or do we leave room for it like the stone says, Mr. Christian? So if you're starting to see my point, these commandments, for lack of a better word, are decidedly unchristian sounding to me. And to other people as well, because they went and vandalized the stones with spray paint and they wrote things like "Death to the New World Order." So that begs the thought, was Mr. Christian actually Christian? Was the Guidestone group actually a Christian group? It seems fishy to me. They commissioned the stones and the messages on them, but not the placard at the site that explains how they came to be. So who wrote that historical text about the development of the project on that placard? Let's think about the location for a second. It's rural Georgia, a place with mostly Christian sensibilities. And then you have a man, the president of a granite finishing company, who is approached by a nameless individual who's representing other individuals who wish to remain anonymous forever. They commission a large project, which no doubt was going to be expensive, but Mr. Granite Man grossly overquoted Mr. Christian in hopes of discouraging him from doing it, only to be surprised when Mr. Christian and the group came back willing to pay the exorbitant amount for the work. So where does that leave us? We have a man, a business owner, who is likely a Christian himself. And now he's having to make a decision. Take the huge paycheck and build a monument with some undeniably secular messages on it. So what will the people think if he does this? This is a small town. We can tell by the vandalism that ended up occurring that these messages have ruffled some feathers amongst a certain group of people. But on the other hand, if you listen to Joel Osteen, you know that Jesus wants you to be rich. Duh. So what is there to do? One, do you build it and then give it a little clear coat of Christianity by claiming it was commissioned by a Christian group when it actually wasn't? Or was this actually a Christian group who decided that the typical Christian ethos was no longer viable, and this would serve as the amendment to that ethos as an unpredictable future draws nearer and nearer? That's the question to be answered. Let me know what you think, and if you like content like this, please subscribe to the channel, and I will see y'all next video. Have a good day.